Let's talk now about one of the biggest deals of 2025, or at least, I guess, agreed to deal. Hasn't been closed, obviously, yet, and that's the battle over Warner Brothers. Paul, this is one you've followed closely. Have you, by the way, have you bought or sold Warner Brothers yourself?
I did with AOL Paper back in 2001.
I knew you'd been involved in that, and I love this deal also because it's one that President Trump had previously killed. Remember when AT&T wanted to buy Warner Brothers?
He's got an interest in it now, it appears.
He said no. The DOJ, they sued the DOJ, and they actually got it done. But then AT&T was like, wait, this was a bad idea. Yes. So then they got rid of it, and now it's up for grabs again. Netflix, that was the agreed deal to buy Warner Brothers. Paramount, of course, in with the hostile offer. So let's talk about how this works out, how it changes the media landscape, the future of streaming, bundling, movies, etc. Paul Larbey joins us to break it down. He's the CEO of Bango. Bango is a global tech company that enables providers to reach more paying customers through global partnerships. I guess that's corporate speak. I looked on the website, and I guess I could just, Paul, tell me about this. I could go to you and say, I want this, that, and the other streaming service. You bundle it for me, and I just pay you.
Yeah, not directly through us. I mean, in fact, we enable other brands to do that. So if you're a Verizon customer, for example, and you're getting Netflix and HBO Max together as part of a package, we're the technology that provides that. So we enable anybody who has a subscription service like Netflix or even through to AI-based services to basically resell it through a channel. And our product for that is called the digital vending machine. And so we're that technology partner that sits in the middle. So most people will be using us, but without actually having heard of who we are.
Paul, what do people like yourselves in the industry, in the media industry, in the streaming business? How are you guys viewing this Warner Brothers potential deal going on out there?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think certainly the streaming landscape, potentially this brings together the first and the fourth largest sort of streaming services, and that can sound quite dominating. But actually, if you look at the number of streaming services we have, it actually potentially solves a customer demand. You know, something like 30% of people have 4 or more different video streaming services. And if you watch sports, then you probably have 5 or 6 because those tend to be more spread across different services. And all our Bango data shows that customers are crying out for simplification and consolidation. And that's sort of what we've been doing. So in some ways, bringing these two together makes a lot of sense for a consumer perspective. I think it needs to sort of be put in perspective, right? We're bringing these two together. The question is sort of what follows after that. Because I think the last thing we want to do is recreate, and if that what Netflix disrupted, which was that big cable TV package. So you don't want to end up with one streaming service that is so expensive. It just looks like the cable packages used to look like sort of 5 or 10 years ago.
By the way, if you were, Paul, in charge of the FTC and you had to look at the streaming universe, obviously Netflix and HBO and Prime are in there. Would you also include YouTube and Instagram and what's the Chinese one? TikTok?
Yeah.
Would you include all those as well?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the media landscape is traditionally evolving. And we've talked about things like the death of sort of live TV for some time now. And live TV has really become now to a point where it's sort of news, big social events where maybe there's a voting element, something like, the Oscars or the Golden Globe Awards or sport. And really, sort of really live TV sort of relegated down to those. And the people that are really will survive in this media landscape are the people that embrace these sort of changes. And likewise, we've seen the evolution of sort of short form content that can sit alongside some of the more well-produced, longer-form sort of content. So the companies that are going to survive in this really are all sort of coming together, and it's really the innovative ones that adopt the live events that make sense, the short-form content, alongside the more traditional video entertainment content that are basically the companies that will ultimately survive and be successful. And I think that's where Netflix have shown sort of great innovation in sort of bringing all these different elements together.
Do you worry, Paul, about movie theaters all going broke because everything gets streamed and kids just consume content on their tiny little screens in their bedrooms with the door double locked so mom and dad don't come in? I mean, what about the big screen?
Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting thing. And Netflix historically have gone for sort of more niche or limited cinema releases to get sort of prestige or to qualify for sort of awards. I know they've committed to extending and not taking all of the new content should the acquisition be successful directly to streaming and still preserving those theatrical releases. But I think actually the theatrical industry has to sort of reinvent itself. It has to create more of an experience, not just be about seeing something on a slightly bigger screen in a slightly different seat. It needs to reinvent itself and create that experience experience. And I think if it does that, there'll always be a place for it, right? It's much more of a social element. And so I think it's a case of just adjusting the experience.
Paul, let's talk about big time sports. I'm talking NFL sports. I'm talking English Premier League, the stuff that really moves the needle. Is that programming in size going to move to streamers?
Yeah, I think what we've seen is ultimately it's become fragmented, so it's becoming more and more different places, right? And I think that's a challenge for the consumer. And there's a question of, if you're a massive fan, how many of these sporting services are you willing to sign up for to see the complete season? And I think we'll get to a point pretty soon where we're sort of a breaking point. And certainly our research has shown that if you're a sports fan, you probably have an extra 2 or 3 different subscription services purely to get your entire sports, whether that be NFL or whether that be soccer, so you can see the full element. So I think it actually will for sure evolve to the streaming. The streaming players will be involved. I think that then becomes a question of how many players are really sustainable. How many people can you divide a single season between before customers just get turned off?
Yeah, I would think sports fans are just unhappy people right now. Because you know what? When we were kids, Paul, you could watch all of the greatest sports on your free over-the-air broadcast television, and now it's just impossible.
No, so it's that's why if you're Paramount, this is a have-to-do deal. If it's Netflix, it's a nice-to-do deal. But if you're Paramount, you got to own Warner Bros.
What does David Zaslav do here, Paul? I mean,
goes to the bank.
This is a guy who, when he changed HBO's name to Max, he looked like a chump. But right now, he looks like an absolute hero.
Yeah, that was one of those brands that sort of came and went, wasn't it? Right, we're back to where we started. But I think there's a great library of content there, and I think having a distribution partner like Netflix who can take that content and those brands to market, I think is a really, really powerful combination. It sort of creates a sort of question of what's left with the cable assets that are left, and what's the value that's placed on those. But I think it's a great outlet for some great brands that we all know and love.
Yep, very good. Paul Larbey, Chief Executive Officer at Bango, giving us his thoughts on the greater media space. We got that big trade, Warner Brothers Discovery. It's either going to be Netflix or Paramount at this point, so we'll see how that plays out.